Hello everybody, my name is Brian Hussar. I make my videos when I can, when my children allow me.
Dad, can I please have a peanut butter sandwich?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, buddy.
Can I please have a peanut butter sandwich?
Yeah, hey Harrison, can you make your brother a peanut butter sandwich, please?
Oh, come on! Fine!
Come on, dude. Yeah. I talk about the Beatles, music, movies, physical media, and if you like any of that stuff, if you like any of that in any sort of combination, please subscribe, spread the word about my channel. So I wasn't going to do this. I really don't like doing videos about, clickbaity type things. But there have been a couple of videos out there. I know me, Mr. Mayo, just did one, and I decided to chime in on this as well. First off, the headlines. I mean, Paul's making some headlines now, isn't he? Paul says John instigated the breakup. Paul said John did this. And then the other one, Paul said the Rolling Stones are a blues cover band. Now, let's tackle the simple one first. I'm sure Paul, for the Stones fans, and I'm a Stones fan as well, and I'm sure Paul is taking the piss out of that, but when the Stones and the Beatles say something about each other in the media, they like to post the headlines about that. Like, somewhere in the 2000s, I remember they asked Keith Richards if the Beatles are overrated. And the headlines were, Keith Richards says the Beatles are overrated, but his complete statement was, yes, the Beatles are overrated, and so are we. So he said both the Beatles and the Stones are overrated. So there you go. That was the full quote. I read the full quote, and partially that is true. The Stones did start out primarily as a blues cover band. Damn good blues cover band, but they really had no interest in writing their own songs until Andrew Loog Oldham told Mick and Keith that they need to write songs, and he locked them in a room with a piano and a guitar and said, do not come out until you write a song. And they came up with As Tears Go By. So to me, that's a non-controversy, and knowing how close Paul is with Keith and Mick, I'm sure it was a bit of taking the piss out of each other. You know, that's what they do. That's what friends do, okay? We joke with each other. We deliberately do that. I take the piss out of a lot of my friends, so there you go. Now, the issue I have with Paul's statement. First off, that's a non-controversy. Paul said this a while ago. He said this in the 1986 Rolling Stone interview around the time Press to Play came out. He has said this. He's been down this road before. John even said it himself in the 1970 Rolling Stone interview. And getting back to John in the 1970 Rolling Stone interview and the Rolling Stones, John said far more controversial things about the Rolling Stones in that interview than Paul ever did. Check it out. But getting back now to Paul and John instigating the breakup, John said it himself in the Rolling Stone interview. I started the band. I disbanded the band. And I touched on my own theories in a video a couple years ago where I was talking about John and why, in my opinion, why John took it so personal. He wanted the Beatles to end, but when Paul gave that self-interview, which, by the way, in that interview, he doesn't say he's leaving the group. He makes it sound like it's a break. But still, John took it so personal. Now, granted, Paul did make his announcement or the interview to tie in with his album. There you go. But then, again, people read between the lines. And prior to that, John said he was told to keep his mouth shut. And he did keep his mouth shut. In fact, they were all keeping their mouth shut. John and George gave interviews in early 1970 prior to the McCartney album coming out, talking about going into the studio in May. And John was even talking about doing live shows. It will be a rebirth. So if he was acting and playing the part, he sure was doing some method acting, in my opinion. But I notice this stuff with Paul all the time, though. This should not be a major headline. But this is something I wanted to talk about for a long time, and seeing these headlines kind of brought me to it. I read Many Years From Now. I have issues with Many Years From Now. It's sort of a Paul McCartney autobiography / biography. Barry Miles is the author, but it was done with Paul's full blessing. Barry Miles obviously has personal issues with John in the book. For instance, some of these unreleased McCartney excursions into the avant-garde are some of the most brilliant pieces you've never heard. They are up there with Stockhausen. They are up there with John Cage. They're up there with the works of Ligeti. Whereas John's stuff is this amateurish, it's good when you're stoned, he said about What's the New Mary Jane. And I hate when an author has got to put his opinions in there. And Barry Miles obviously has an anti-John agenda. But Paul has been that way, and it does kind of get on my nerves. And I love Paul. I'm not an anti-Paul hater. I am not an anti-Paul hater. You know, God bless you, Paul. You're still with us, you know. More power to you. But reading the book and other things about Paul, like back in 2013, he started performing Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. Now, all of a sudden, Paul co-wrote that with John. Never in a million years did Paul ever say that he co-wrote Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. But now it's like, I read a lot of interviews where it says that John wrote that song. He wrote the song, but I was there. I remember it wrote itself, but it was, you know, I showed him the poster. He bought the poster, and we sort of took the words from the poster and everything. And I wrote, that's 50-50. I wrote that. So shit like that does kind of piss me off about Paul. Where all of his masterworks, all of the Macca masterworks that we know, Yesterday, Eleanor Rigby, Hey Jude, John supposed never had a hand in writing any of those. Now, some of them, John even admitted he didn't. But Paul somehow wove himself into the narrative of In My Life, where Paul has said, in Many Years From Now, that I came up with the melody and the chords. There was a mellotron in John's corridor when I was thinking of Tracks of My Tears by Smokey Robinson. Something like that, he said, and he came up with the melody, and it's a good song that John sang. But yet, Eleanor Rigby, there's another dispute. John always said that he helped with the education of the child, and he said that he didn't want Eleanor and Father Mackenzie to cross paths at the end, and told that to Paul. But Paul always likes to say, John didn't have anything to do with that. That was all me. That was all me. But when it comes to some of John's masterworks, Paul somehow he weaves himself into the narrative. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. John's not here anymore to defend himself. I know what John said in the 1980 Rolling Stone interview with, I believe it was David Sheff, I believe. Not Rolling Stone, the Playboy interview. But John had said, it seems like, okay, if we're going to play this, go down this route, okay, She's Leaving Home is thought of as a Paul song. It's thought of as a Paul song by everybody. But in my eyes, that's a 50-50 co-writing thing. Because John came up with the, we gave her most of our lives, sacrificed most of our lives, we gave her everything money could buy. That's all John's words and his melody. Paul even said John came up with the Greek chorus part. That's co-written. John came up with all of that part. So to me, that's a collaboration. Getting Better is thought of as a Paul song with, but Paul always says John came up with It Couldn't Get Much Worse. Very John, okay. And but John also came up with the whole I used to be cruel to my woman, I beat her and kept her apart from the things that she loved. You can't imagine Paul ever writing a line like that. That is John. So that's something that does sort of get on my nerves this sort of rewriting of history, if that is the case. Again, this is just my speculation, my own opinions about it, because John's not here to give interviews. George isn't here. But George even said he contributed 2 lines to Eleanor Rigby. So to me, Eleanor Rigby, based on everything, sounds more like a Lennon McCartney Harrison song. And one could say, shouldn't George get a songwriting credit on And I Love Her? Paul's the one who said George came up with ding, 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 ding. I don't know. That's going down a different path there. But my point is, Paul's been doing this, sort of, I'm not the bad guy kind of thing since 1986. And also trying to show that I was the avant-garde one. I was the avant-garde one too. John came up with this stuff after when he met Yoko, but I was the one who was turning him on to Stockhausen. I showed him how to make tape loops. The difference between me and John is John would want to make a whole album out of it, whereas I would want to bring these influences in and put them in songs. Yes, Paul did the tape loops on Tomorrow Never Knows. Paul gave the idea to John about the big orchestral crescendo on A Day in the Life. But John was the one who made albums out of it, and John was the one who conceived of Revolution Number 9 with Yoko. Although it did have George's help, and some of Ringo's help too, on editing the tape loops. So there you go. That is a Beatles track. Paul led the Beatles during Carnival of Light, and he's been trying to put it out. But yet somehow he was against Revolution Number 9. I don't know, but he's trying to show that I was the avant-garde one. I even introduced John to Yoko, and Yoko even admitted as such. But with as Beatle fans, we already know John instigated the breakup, so that's not big news to me. That is not big news, and it really is kind of clickbaity. I mean, it's all out there. We know this. But now it seems like Paul is coming up with this right when Peter Jackson's Get Back is about to premiere next month. I have thoughts on the trailer, which I will post tomorrow. So, take it. John once said he likes to time his big announcements, doesn't he? So let's get Paul in the news, and let's get Paul talking about how, hey, it wasn't my fault that the Beatles broke up. You were the one who kind of made it public, yes and no. That does get on my nerves, this sort of rewriting of history that Paul has been doing lately. But what are some of your thoughts? And again, I want to say I love Paul. I love Macca. And just like with our family members, we always have issues that annoy us with our brothers and sisters. That's how I look at it. But give me some of your thoughts and let me know what you think here. And I will talk to you soon.